Right now, the most powerful weight loss drug ever made isn't approved or dispensable at any pharmacy. It's already being sold to thousands of people on the internet by sellers who legally can't even call it a medicine. It's called Retatrutide, and I've done 2 deep dives recently on this topic. In trials, it beats Ozempic and Wegovy by a wide margin, and it's just one of the dozen compounds people are injecting. This video will be a comprehensive review of the peptides, and one of these compounds, one of the most popular one of all, has been tested in exactly one human study with only 12 people and no control group. But marketing is loud and fear of missing out is all over. That compound is BPC-157, one of the most hyped healing peptides on the internet. Meanwhile, a different group, the celebrities, executive, and the people you watch transform on camera, are stacking 3 of these compounds at once. One to strip fat, one to build muscle, and one to push growth hormone. The before and after photos are impressive. What it cost them in 10 years, nobody can tell you yet because the science hasn't caught up yet. I'm Dr. Amin Hedayat. I'm a triple board certified physician and a medical school assistant clinical professor. And I read the primary research for a living. I really enjoy getting to the bottom of things. Today, I'm going to separate the peptides that are changing medicine from the ones being sold to you on hope. I'll put the actual studies on the screen as we go, and I'll show you the single mistake that could be putting people in the emergency room with a real drug that's commonly being prescribed. By the end, you'll be able to look at any peptide and sort it into 3 colors: green for proven, yellow for promising but unproven, and red for the one thing that can turn even a safe compound harmful and dangerous. Let's start with the word, because we keep hearing the word peptide everywhere, and it's come to mean almost nothing and almost everything. Your body runs on messages. Your cells talk to each other constantly, every second of every day. And they do it with chemical words. A peptide is one of those words. Amino acids are the small building blocks that link together to form proteins. Think of them as letters. String a few letters together and you get a word, which is a peptide. String hundreds together and you get a paragraph, which is a protein. So a peptide is just a small specific message written in the same alphabet your whole body already uses. As an example, insulin is a peptide. Many of your own hormones are peptides. Your gut, your brain, and your glands make them all day long. This is part of your normal biology. So don't let anyone convince you that it's synonymous with a hack someone invented in a lab last year. And if you don't get on the bandwagon, you're missing out on a miracle compound. Some peptides have a known receptor. A receptor is like a lock on the surface of a cell, and the peptide is the key. When the right key slides into the right lock, something specific and predictable happens. This is usually something we can measure and repeat it. Other peptides don't have a clear receptor that we've ever identified. They seem to do things, at least in animals, but we can't point to the lock they're turning. Maybe there's a receptor we haven't found. Maybe they affect your genes in a subtle way. We honestly aren't sure. So here's how we'll sort them. Green means known lock and real human trials. These earn their place. Yellow means interesting biology, but thin or missing human data. Basically, they're promising, but unproven. And red is the one that catches people off guard, because red is not about the molecule at all. It's about where the molecule came from. We'll refer to these colors, and we're going to tag everything as we go. But one thing before we start sorting them. If you want the studies behind every claim, not just the hype or baseless claims, please subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, and stay with me. That's the whole promise here, and I try to present hard science in sensible terms without oversimplifying the topics. Now, let's start where the evidence is the strongest, because this is the category that changed medicine and quietly made millions of people comfortable holding a needle. You already know the names. Ozempic and Wegovy are brand names for a drug called semaglutide or semaglutide. Mounjaro and Zepbound are brand names for Tirzepatide. They belong to a family built around GLP-1, which stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. I've covered these drugs in detail in the past, including ways to exit them while keeping your results. I also have a video on how to increase GLP-1 naturally. In case you haven't watched my previous videos, I'll do a quick recap here. GLP-1 is a natural gut hormone. After you eat, your intestine releases it, and it does 3 useful things. It tells your pancreas, the organ that controls blood sugar, to release insulin. It slows how fast your stomach empties, so you feel full longer. and it signals your brain that you've had enough. But the catch with the natural hormone is that it vanishes within minutes. These drugs are engineered to copy it and stick around for a week. The receptor here is well mapped. That's the whole point, because we know the lock. The effects are large and consistent across thousands of people. This is some of the best studied medicines of the last decade. Let me give you the actual numbers because they're in fact impressive. In the Step 1 trial published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2021, almost 2,000 adults with obesity took semaglutide for 68 weeks. They lost an average of about 15% of their body weight. Tirzepatide went further. In the SURMOUNT-1 trial of more than 2,500 adults, the highest dose produced an average loss of about 21% over 72 weeks. And in a head-to-head trial called SURMOUNT-5, published in 2025, Tirzepatide beat semaglutide directly, roughly 20% against about 14%. Then there is Retatrutide, and this is one of the newest ones, but it's still in trials to assess for safety, efficacy, and the FDA approval. Retatrutide hits 3 targets at once. In its 2023 trial in the New England Journal of Medicine, 338 adults took it for 48 weeks, and at the top dose, they lost an average of 24% of their body weight, roughly 58 pounds. The same study showed liver fat dropping by around 86% in the high-dose group, with most of those patients returning to normal liver fat levels. And the larger trials are landing right now. In December 2025, the first big late-stage result showed about 29% average weight loss. In May 2026, the main obesity trial reported about 28% at 80 weeks, climbing toward 30% in heavier patients who stayed on it longer. Retatrutide isn't approved at the time of recording of this video. It's investigational, meaning it's still being studied. Here's where I want to be careful because weight loss is not the whole story. And the easy headline hides the part that matters most. In a trial called SELECT, more than 17,000 people with heart diseases and excess weight, but without diabetes, took semaglutide. The result was a 20% drop in major adverse cardiovascular events. That's the medical term for the outcome we fear most, meaning heart attack, stroke, and death from heart causes. That benefit looked at least partly independent of how much weight people lost. So these may be doing something protective beyond shrinking the number on the scale. The brain is where this gets most interesting and most uncertain. We're learning these drugs reach reward circuits, not just appetite. In a 2025 randomized trial in JAMA Psychiatry, adults with alcohol use disorder who took low-dose semaglutide for 9 weeks drank less and reported weaker cravings than those on a placebo. It was small, just 48 people, and short, so I hold it loosely. But it fits a growing picture that these drugs may quiet the pull of alcohol and possibly other cravings too. That same reach into the brain is why some people hope these drugs might slow dementia. But the honest answer, at least so far, is no. In late 2025, the 2 largest trials ever run on this question, called EVOKE and EVOKE Plus, tested oral semaglutide in nearly 3,800 people with early Alzheimer's disease. The drug didn't slow it. Certain biomarkers moved in the right direction, but people's memory and daily function didn't benefit. Here's a quick question while we're in it. Are you taking one of these or thinking about it? Tell me which one in the comments and what you're hoping it'll do. I read them and the comments become the next video topic. So where do I land? I think the GLP-1 family is a remarkable turning point in how we treat obesity and metabolic disease. For someone stuck in a deep hole who tried to climb out the same way they fell in and couldn't, these can offer a different way out. That's absolutely true, and we see the results every day, and I won't undersell it. But I won't oversell it either. We still have gaps in the science. There's a real question about muscle. Body scans show that somewhere between 1/4 and 40% of the weight people lose on these drugs is lean mass, meaning muscle and other non-fat tissue, not just fat. Here's the nuance. Losing some lean mass comes with almost any large weight loss, including plain dieting and surgery. So it's not unique to these drugs. But it matters, especially in older adults and women who tend to lose more considering perimenopause and hormone changes in general. Eating enough protein and doing resistance training helps protect it. And I covered these in detail a few weeks ago. There are newer muscle-sparing drugs being tested alongside these right now. A few more gaps worth naming. We don't fully understand the long-term effects on a young brain that's flooded with far more of this signal than a body normally makes. When people stop the drug, many regain about 2/3 of the weight within a year, which tells you this is a treatment, not a cure. And we keep seeing accidental pregnancies in women who were told they couldn't conceive because losing weight can restore fertility, especially in women who are diagnosed with PMOS, formerly known as PCOS. If you're interested in a deep dive on PMOS, please comment below. If there's high interest, I'll dedicate an episode to this. Now, based on everything I told you, none of that is a reason to panic. I hope to light the tunnel for you to do this health journey with a knowledgeable clinician watching. One more thing while it's relevant, because so many people are getting these from a gray market. I made a free guide called the Vial Audit. It walks through the red flags, the questions to ask, and how to tell a legitimate source from a dangerous one before you ever buy or inject anything. It's a free download, and the link is in the pinned comment and description. Now the second piece of that celebrity stack, because this is where things get more complicated. Growth hormone is exactly what it sounds like. Your pituitary gland, a small gland at the base of your brain, releases it, and it helps build tissue, recover from exercise, and keep skin and sleep healthy. You make the most of it when you're young. Somewhere in your 30s, producing drops off. A change researchers called somatopause. Your level of a related marker called IGF-1, which stands for insulin-like growth factor 1, and reflects how much growth hormone is working, falls right along with it. So people try to push it back up. There are two general ways, and the difference is important. The first is taking growth hormone itself. It's expensive, often thousands of dollars, and tightly controlled. The second uses compounds that doesn't give you growth hormone directly. It presses on the gas pedal so your own glands make more. Some are peptides like ipamorelin and CJC1295. One common one, MK677, isn't even a peptide, but it works on the same hunger and growth pathway, and it isn't approved by the FDA. Here's the one in this family that has truly earned its stripes. Tesamorelin is a growth hormone releasing compound that the FDA approved back in 2010. It's approved for a specific problem, excess belly fat in people with HIV, and it works in trials, cutting that deep abdominal fat by roughly 15%. But I want to slow down on safety because this is where people get seduced. The patients I know who take growth hormone or these compounds that I just mentioned often say the same thing. They feel great. They may look younger. Their skin changes. They recover faster. They think more clearly. I know that's appealing. Feeling amazing is not the same thing as being safe over decades, and growth hormone raises an unresolved concern. It's a growth signal. This scientific debate isn't really about whether it causes cancer out of nowhere. It's about whether it could feed a cancer that's already quietly there by encouraging things to grow. We don't have a clean answer in science. We also know that across species, more growth and higher IGF-1 tend to go with shorter lives, not longer. In dogs, for example, the smaller breeds that make less of the signal live longer than the giant breeds that make more. Scientists call this antagonistic pleiotropy. Something that helps you when you're young may cost you later. In addition, growth hormone and these compounds can worsen insulin sensitivity, meaning they can push your blood sugar up. There's a running joke in the bodybuilding world that you have to get lean and healthy before you ever consider to take growth hormone. That joke contains scientific basis and a warning. I've had patients whose lab markers drifted on these compounds in ways they couldn't feel. A prostate number creeping up, blood sugar edging higher, and they would never have caught it without testing. That's the entire reason a knowledgeable and up-to-date physician belongs in this conversation. Not to gatekeep, but to catch the thing you can't feel before it becomes a thing you can't fix. Now we cross over to the other path, the peptides without a clear receptor. And the most famous one by far is BPC-157. The history is quite fascinating. BPC stands for Body Protection Compound. A research group in Croatia in the 1990s was studying gastric juice, the fluid in your stomach, looking for something that protects the gut from the damage. Over a century ago, scientists noticed that stressed animals showed a clear pattern of damage to the stomach lining, and they suspected the gut must make its own protective substances. The Croatian group isolated a large protein and named it BPC, then found a tiny fragment of it, just 15 amino acids long, seemed to drive the healing. The fragment is BPC 157. So what does the research actually show? In animals, quite a lot, and it's impressive. Researchers cut tendons, injured nerves, created burns and ulcers in rodents, and gave BPC 157, and they saw faster healing across the board. As someone who understands how hard it is to get nerves to regenerate, I find that data striking. It seems to ramp up the body's repair machinery, partly by encouraging new blood vessel growth, a process called angiogenesis, driven by a signal called vascular endothelial growth factor. Basically, more blood vessels, more healing factors reaching the injury. So I think this is the most shareable portion of this video. In 2025, researchers published a systemic review in an orthopedic journal. They screened the entire published literature on BPC 157, 544 papers going back to 1993. After filtering for quality, 36 studies made the cut. 35 were animal studies. Exactly one tested in the humans, and that single human study followed just 12 people with knee pain and no comparison group. So this study lacked a control group. That's the whole human evidence base on a compound that millions of people are fearing to miss out on and are injecting them. The most cited human work beyond that involves small early trials using BPC 157 in the gut for ulcerative colitis, a serious disease where the immune system attacks the lining of the intestine. Those reported no obvious harm and a possible benefit, but the full results were never published in a complete reviewed paper. We mostly have brief summaries. That's not enough to build confidence on. We also don't know something basic. We don't know the dose that would be harmful. For every approved drug, researchers established that threshold in animals. For BPC 157, we don't have it, which is one reason it can't move toward approval the normal way. You might have heard about the famous story, the Olympic athlete who supposedly tore his Achilles tendon, took BPC 157, and still won a medal. The most likely truth is that any elite athlete in that situation used every tool available, not one compound, and the single compound version got repeated because it sold a product. And the concern that worries me most is the flip side of that healing power. If BPC 157 encourages new blood vessel to grow, could it feed a tumor sitting somewhere you don't know about, in the gut, in the liver, in the pancreas? It's a fair question. We haven't seen that signal in animal work, which is reassuring. But the animal work is from essentially one group, and we have almost no long-term human safety data. If you have no signal yet from limited data, it's not the same thing as proven safe. There's a relatable compound often mentioned alongside it, TB500, a fragment connected to a protein called thymosin beta 4. It's tied to cell movement and is a known doping agent in horse racing. It sits in the same boat. Interesting biology, almost no rigorous human data. So, yellow, both of them. Here's the regulatory picture, and it's in motion. For years, the FDA kept BPC 157 in a category that means pharmacies shouldn't compound because of safety concerns. A compounding pharmacy, by definition, is a licensed pharmacy that can custom make medications. Then in April 2026, the FDA removed BPC 157 from the restricted list, and an advisory committee is scheduled for late July 2026 to formally consider whether it should be allowed for compounding, with ulcerative colitis as a proposed use. So we may be months away from a real shift here. This is moving somewhere else too. That same month, the United Kingdom's medicine regulator opened an investigation into clinics making health claims about these compounds and named BPC 157 first. For now, no regulator anywhere in the world has approved it for human use, and sports authorities banned it for athletes back in 2022. We'll have to watch where it lands. There's another family you'll run into, the Russian bioregulators, with names like Pinealon and Pinealon or Pinealon and Thymosin. The idea behind them is different and, frankly, more speculative. The theory goes like this. When you're young, your body makes lots of these very short peptides. As you age, they decline. The claim is that replacing them restores something youthful, and the proposed mechanism isn't a simple receptor. These are essentially thought to work in an epigenetic way, meaning they may influence which of your genes get switched on or off without changing the genes themselves. Transcription, the process of reading a gene to make a protein product, gets influenced. But honestly, the evidence is thin, and most of it comes from older Soviet and Russian research that's hard to verify and rarely replicated in the rigorous modern way we'd want. The most dramatic claim is a long-running study in nursing home residents reporting lower deaths in those who got these peptides. If that held up under strict independent testing, it would be remarkable. I can't tell you it has. So I filed this whole category under interesting, but unproven. Treat with caution. And I'd never want you mistaking a compelling story for settled science. Clearly yellow, maybe the palest yellow on the board. But there's one piece in this conversation that's worth your attention, and it's grounded in mainstream medicine: the thymus. The thymus is a gland that sits behind your breastbone, just above your heart. When you're a child, it's large and functionally busy. Its job is to train your T cells, which are immune cells that learn to attack invaders, and just as important, learn not to attack you. Starting at puberty, the thymus shrinks, a process called involution, largely under influence of your own sex hormones and stress hormones. By the time you're middle-aged, it's mostly fat with little working tissue left. But why should you care? Because as that immune training fades, we see more of the diseases of aging, more autoimmune problems where the body attacks itself, and arguably weaker defense against cancer. And there's a real signal here. A 2023 study in the New England Journal of Medicine followed adults who had their thymus surgically removed during heart surgery. 5 years later, about 8% of them had died, compared to under 3% of similar patients who kept their thymus, and their cancer rate was roughly double. That was an observational study, so I can't prove the thymus caused the difference, but it's a hint that the little gland we tend to ignore may matter more in adulthoods than we assumed. This is where the thymus peptides enter, like thymosin alpha-1. Thymosin alpha-1, sold abroad as Zepbound, is approved in more than 35 countries for things like chronic hepatitis B, a viral liver infection. But it's not and has never been approved by the FDA here in the United States. There's a real research behind it overseas, especially for immune support, and its American status is unsettled, and it's caught up in the same compounding review as the others. Is there a way to rebuild thymus function? There's early hopeful work. One small study used a combination of growth hormone and 2 other agents and reported the thymus actually growing on imaging, along with younger-looking thymus markers. But I want to stress small, early, and not confirmed. It's a hypothesis worth chasing, not a plan to act on yet. And I personally wouldn't want to be the first in line to try these when the evidence is still at this stage. There's even a cheap overlooked clue that you can ask your own doctor about. A standard blood count includes your lymphocytes and your monocytes, 2 types of immune cells. The ratio between them tends to track with immune health, and a poor ratio shows up alongside worse outcomes in a long list of diseases. It's a few dollar test almost everyone has already had, but a few clinicians look at it through this lens. As a clinical pathologist, I think more physicians should, and I teach this to my medical students. Now, let me bring this to skin because this is the part of medicine I know best, and because the question I get most, especially from women, are about one peptide, GHK-copper. GHK-copper is a small peptide, just 3 amino acids bound to a copper ion. A researcher discovered it in the 1970s, and it's found naturally in the collagen of your skin. Collagen, as we covered it in the sunscreen episode, is the protein scaffolding that keeps skin firm and connective tissue strong. GHK-copper sits right in the middle of the machinery. It seems to help regulate both the building up and the breaking down of the collagen, which is how the tissue gets remodeled in a healthy way. And here's a clean detail. It's blue because of the copper. So if a GHK-copper product isn't blue, something's off. Like so much in this field, the levels are high in youth and fall with age. So the natural question is whether replacing it does anything. Here's what I honestly think. On the skin applied as a cream, the evidence is actually decent. There is a peer-reviewed research on GHK-copper for skin quality and signs of aging, comparing well against other common ingredients. That's the lane I'm comfortable in. And for topical use, I'd call it the rare yellow that's edging toward green. For hair, the data is weaker, so I treat it as a possible add-on, not a replacement for proven treatments. And for injection, especially into the face, the human evidence simply isn't there. And that's exactly where I'm a bit concerned at this stage of research. If you want to try a well-made GHK-copper cream as part of a thoughtful skincare routine, I think that's reasonable. Please use it alongside the basics that actually work, not in their place. But be careful about injecting it into your face. I see people often without medical training putting needles into delicate tissue based on a forum post. And the risk to benefit ratio math doesn't really favor you. The face is not the place to run a home experiment. Also, people love to pair GHK-copper with red light to boost skin repair. And there is some support for that combination. But the best source of that kind of light, full spectrum and balanced, is the one we evolved under, sunlight. You just have to respect it and not overdo the part that burns and ages your skin. As a dermatopathologist, I always tell my patients the cheapest anti-aging tool is not getting the damage in the first place. If you haven't watched the sunscreen verdict episode, please consider watching it after this video, and this should make sense. Remember the mistake I promised you at the start, the one sending people to the emergency room with a real drug? Here it is, and it's where people actually get hurt because it isn't usually the chemistry. It's the supply chain. Most people buying these peptides aren't getting them from a responsible pharmacy. They're getting the product from a website that labels the product for research use only, not for human consumption. People opt to sign that line, but nobody is running a lab experiment in their kitchen. It's a legal side door, and we all know it. This isn't theoretical, and it isn't only the gray market. Even with a real known drug, the way it's prepared can hurt people. In 2024, the FDA warned about dosing errors with compounded semaglutide, the same drug that's in those branded name pens, but supplied in a vial instead. People were drying up 5 to 20 times the intended dose. Some ended up in the hospital. The reason is simple and avoidable. The pens are engineered to deliver one exact dose. A vial and a syringe are not, and patients got confused between milligrams, milliliters, and units, which are 3 different ways to measure a dose that are very easy to mix up. Now layer the gray market on top of that, where you don't even know whether the substance in the vial is what the label claims. There are documented reports of people whose skin slowly darkened over weeks because the vial labeled as one peptide actually contained melanotan, a completely different compound that darkens the skin. They had no idea until the change in the mirror was undeniable. When you buy this way, you're trusting a stranger with what goes into your bloodstream, and usually no one is checking the work. So you'll notice something about this whole video. I haven't given you a single dose. I haven't told you where to buy anything, how to mix it, or where to inject it. That's on purpose, and I want to explain why. For most of these compounds, we don't actually know the right human dose. The numbers floating around online are often arbitrary, not from an actual human studies. Handing you a number would be pretending to a certainty that doesn't exist. And for unapproved injectable compounds, the responsible thing, the thing I tell my own family, is that this belongs in a conversation with a licensed and informed clinician who can monitor you. I'm here to help you understand the science so you're informed before spending money and potentially harming yourself. So where does this leave you? First, get a physician you trust and build a real relationship with one. That single thing drives more good health than any vial ever will. And if you're curious about this world, find a clinician willing to be honest with you, including honest about uncertainty. If they promise you miracles, be careful. If they say, here's what we know, here's what we don't, and here's how we'd watch you, that's one person you want. Be mindful of quick scripts for Google reviews and telehealth practitioners there for a quick buck. Second, the basics come first. There's no point layering exotic compounds onto a life without enough sleep, without morning light, without real food, without movement. Those aren't the boring warm-ups before the real thing. They are the real thing, and they're the foundation everything else is built on. I teach this step-by-step on www.getuninflamed.com in a protocol I designed and tested with thousands of patients. It's launching soon, but the waitlist is free and lives on getuninflamed.com. Third, understand the moment we're in. The rules around these compounds are shifting right now, this year in real time. What's restricted today may be available through a pharmacy in a few months. And that cuts both ways. It could mean safer, tested access under medical supervision, which I'd welcome. Or it could mean a telehealth shop on every corner stamping prescription like an online checkout, which would be the opposite of good care. Which future we get depends partly on whether people approach this with patience and honesty, or with a rush to inject first and ask questions later. And if you made it all the way here, you're my kind of viewer. Tell me in the comments, what would you want me to audit next? The compound or the claim you keep seeing and can't get a straight answer on? That's usually the next topic. Here's a deeper reason I care. There are really two bad endings for this whole peptide story. In one, these compounds turn out to be as useful as the marketing believes, and millions of people suffered through injuries and illness because we never studied them properly. In the other, they turn out to be harmful, and millions injected them anyway, sourced from strangers, with no one watching. Both are bad. The only way out of both is better data, captured carefully and responsibly by people trying to disprove their own hopes rather than confirm them. That's what real science looks like, and it's what you deserve before you put something in your body. So my honest verdict on peptides is that they're neither magical nor fraud. I see them as a spectrum. Green, the well-studied medicines that are changing lives. Yellow, the fascinating compounds we don't quite understand, sold by people who understand them even less but are the loudest to create a sense of fear of missing out. And red, this source problem that can make either one dangerous. Your job and mine is to know which one is which, and to stay humble about everything in between. If this helped you think more clearly, that's my goal. Bring these questions to your own physician, not as a fight, but as a real conversation. You're allowed to ask hard questions about what goes into your body. You're allowed to expect honest answers. And if this is the way you want to think about your health, evidence first, no hype, and no one's selling you anything. That's exactly what I'm building on this channel and at getuninflamed.com. It's a membership for people who want the real version of this, and people on the waitlist get in first. The launch date is close, and people on the waitlist will be notified first. You can add your name now, and you'll be the first to know when the doors open. I'll continue reading the research and bringing you what's new as it comes. Until next time, stay uninflamed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.